Do you recognize this man? Professor Jayakumar served as a member of parliament for over 30 years, but his most famous line wasn't delivered in the chambers of Singapore's parliament. It was 10,000 kilometers away in the Netherlands at the International Court of Justice. You see, Singapore and Malaysia had been embroiled in a decades-long dispute over an island smaller than a football field called Pedra Branca. After all attempts to settle it as neighbours broke down, the case was heard in the International Court of Justice, and in the final week of hearings, Professor Jayakumar delivered a slam dunk in 10 words, and it would forever seal his fate as one of the finest statesmen Singapore has ever produced. And this is what he said. Throughout his political career, Professor Jayakumar was largely known as a silent but effective operator. While he did not speak with the thunder in his voice like Lee Kuan Yew did, his intellect was his weapon, and it was obvious. By 39 years old, he was already appointed as Dean of NUS Law School, and he was content with being in academia. He had even turned down the invitation, but the turning point came when Goh Chok Tong asked him a question that stopped him cold. Suppose you are on the top of our list, and if you say no, and we have to go down the list, and everybody else keeps saying no. We then go to the bottom of the list, and then later, would you regret it if something went awry in Singapore? Jayakumar stood for elections and became an MP for Bedok. Now, before I tell you what the 10 words Professor Jayakumar said, we need to rewind to 2 of his career-defining moments to get the full context. 6 years into his political career, disaster struck. Hotel New World, a 6-story building in Little India, collapsed, trapping 50 people under tons of rubble. As Minister for Law and Second Minister for Home Affairs, Professor Jayakumar was on the ground. He led the ministerial group behind the scenes, working with SCDF commanders, military engineers, structural experts, and foreign consultants. And for 6 days, every decision flowed through that room, and he made the calls. Then came the hijacking of Singapore Airlines Flight 117 in 1991. SQ-117 was en route from KL when it was taken over by 4 Pakistani hijackers. 129 passengers and crew were held hostage. Professor Jayakumar was once again in the eye of the storm, and when negotiations broke down and the hijackers threatened to start unaliving hostages, the executive group led by Professor Jayakumar made the call to storm the plane. The commandos went in, and it was all over in 30 seconds. And the reason I brought these cases up is to show you that Professor Jayakumar stayed out of the limelight. There was no fanfare and no self-congratulations, because that's just who he was. So exactly what was the drama about? On the surface, it looked like a petty squabble over a barren rock. But make no mistake, the implications were massive. If Singapore lost, it wouldn't just be about territory. It would mean Malaysia could control the sea lanes around it, and it would signal that Singapore could be bullied into submission. And to get the point across, Singapore didn't just field our brightest legal minds. We showed the world we could rally global firepower. On top of Professor Jayakumar and Professor Tommy Koh, we brought in international legal heavyweights. We had one of the world's foremost experts in international law, a top professor from Columbia Law School, and a British international law scholar. This wasn't just Singapore saying we know our rights, it was Singapore saying we will out-research you, out-prepare you, and if needed, we will out-lawyer you. If you challenge our sovereignty, prepare to face not just us, but the full weight of international law, strategy, and talent we can marshal. And that was the real flex, and behind it all was Professor Jayakumar. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but like Nick Fury, he was a strategist, the one who assembled the Avengers not for glory, but to get the job done. And in the end, the case was won on 10 quiet words.
What can be clearer than these 10 words? The Johor government does not claim ownership of Pedra Branca.
That line from a 1953 letter uncovered in Singapore's archives was the nail in the coffin, just a single line from Malaysia's own government disavowing ownership. And that's the irony. We didn't need to assemble the Avengers. The facts were already stacked in our favour. And again, there were no victory laps or press conferences, because for Professor Jayakumar, it was just another day in the office.